Hello, my name is Luke and I'm here to show you the good stuff. Today I'm going to show you how you can get an indie pop bass tone that makes you sound like a genius. So let's dive right in. I've got a song here that I made. I'm going to show it you from the first verse or the beginning all the way up to the end of the first chorus so you can get a feel for the bass and its tone in context of the song, and then we'll break down exactly what's going on. So let's dive right in. If I solo the bass track and open it up, you can see that I've got three different tracks here. We're going to break this down into three parts. We're going to go and look into performance, plugins that I use for the tone, and then the mixing in relation to the rest of the instruments. So the first thing, performance. If you take a listen to the verse of the bass here, you'll hear that I play with a medium sort of attack. Which contrasts to the chorus where I give it way more. Take a listen. So there's just way more attack in the chorus, and that's only because I'm just hitting it a bit harder. That's all it is. But it's very, very intentional. I'm not just belting the strings and just feeling it, right? It's intentional. I wanted the verse to be a bit smoother, a little bit more sultry in its playing style, okay? A bit more cool. And then I wanted the chorus to instill a bit of that excitement and playing a bit harder, getting a bit more of that attack. I'm using a thick plectrum, so I don't think I'm using either of these two that are on my desk. I think I've got another one over there. I use a slightly thicker pick. This just works a bit better for the thicker strings for me, and I find that I get like a nice attack sound. And you'll find if you're playing bass and guitar, by looking at the thickness of your pick, you'll get different sounds out of it, right? So just pay attention to that when you're next using a plectrum or picking one to use anyway. So that's the first thing. There's the contrast. Slightly softer in the verse and then a little bit more aggressive in the chorus here. The other thing that you'll notice is I've cut these gaps both in the verse, which I've just grayed out there, and then in the chorus you'll see I've just deleted them entirely. What I've done here is I've cleaned up the bass, and so this is part of the editing. I would also call it a part of like the performance, because this is how the bass just sounds straight out of the box. If I just unmute all my plugins, or mute all my plugins, I should say, on the track here, including the ones up top here, this is how the bass sounds just on its own. So obviously, first off, you can hear it's very different to the finished sound, which we will go over. But you can hear that even without all the plugins, it's still a clean performance. Okay, and that is partly down to obviously the intention behind my playing, which is that medium attack in this verse, but also cutting out the space here. If I bring this space back in, you'll hear that there's a lot of extra noise we don't need. Take a listen. Hear that? I'm kind of scratching the strings a bit. That was cool, but I decided I didn't want that for the verse. So I decided to clean that up. Now, if I wanted to go very granular, I could go in a bit further and start editing out these gaps here. This would give it a really tight, super funky sound. But I didn't want that particular sound in this instance. I wanted it to be a little more indie-esque. Hence why I only cleaned up some of the bits and pieces. If I just bring back in the gaps in the chorus here, because you see I've been a bit more aggressive with the cuts here. Let me just bring them back in. Take a listen to how this sounds. Can you hear how I'm moving on the string? So in every gap, you can hear the string where I'm moving. And so that's what getting rid of the gaps did. It gets rid of that string noise. And so for the chorus, it made it super duper tight. And the reason for that is because the chorus is way more groovy. There's a bit more going on. I was really paying attention to the space in the chorus. And so it was important for me that I cleaned up any unnecessary noise. So that is part of the performance. So playing with intent and then editing out any things that you don't need, right? Really tidying it up. A part of that was also flexing it. So in Logic, if you press Command F, you can open up flex time and then you can time it to the grid. I have timed it to 1/8 notes, and the strength I've just left at 100%. Again, I wanted a really, really tight bass line. So that's what I did for that. Now let's take a look at the plugins that I used for the tone. So I'm going to focus on this top one here because this is my main bass sound here. So we'll just mute these down here. And let's take a look at what I've got going on. So for the tone, I did experiment using a bass plugin, but I decided that I didn't like the sound that it gave. I did have an existing sound somewhere, but I didn't like it. I think I might have deleted it, so I can't show you. But I wasn't keen on it, and I think this just goes to accentuate or highlight that you don't need a bass plugin to get a nice bass tone. So a lot of indie tones I find kind of have that sort of DI type signal, but it's really nicely processed. So the first thing that I added was Infinity EQ, and I've done some aggressive cutting here, and I'll add each of the plugins one by one and play it back so you can hear the difference. So you can see that I boosted a lot of the low, I took out a lot of the mid-range around 425 there, and then I boosted a lot of the highs, and this is how it sounds. So you can hear there's a lot more deep end, there's a lot more richness to it, there's a lot less muddiness, and there's way more clarity in the top end. So already we've made a huge difference with that singular EQ. The next thing I added was a compressor. This is an FET 76, and it is it's brilliant for this sort of stuff, really. I've got a super fast attack, so I'm catching any peaks, and then I've got kind of a mid release here. And you see it's only coming in occasionally, just there. Just docking down about 2 to 3 decibels of gain reduction, because again, I just wanted to catch any sort of transient peaks and stuff like that, just to help smooth out the signal. The next thing that I added was some R bass. This is a goated plugin. The key of the song, I think, is G. And I went on to Google and I just typed in fundamental key frequency. The reason for that, and I'll show you that quickly, is because every key has a fundamental frequency. So if I just go to Google, I've got a second screen here, and I go to fundamental key frequency. You just type this in. If you just type this in here, fundamental key frequency, this refers to the lowest frequency of the periodic waveform. I click on this one here in Western music, and then you can see here that in the key of G, we're at 49 hertz, just there, okay? Which is why I set it at 49 hertz, because that's the key of the song, and that's the bass part that I want to accentuate there. And that's what our bass does. It kind of brings out a lot of that richness. So let's take a listen to what that's doing. You'll either need to be on good speakers or headphones for this, but you can hear in the bottom there, it's giving it a lot more beef. I then added an effect rack, which is this one here. And I'll play you what that sounds like. So what that's doing, I've got 2 stages of saturation here. We've got the decapitator, which I've got the drive midway at number 5, and I've got it on the E setting here. And the mix is at 50%, you can see there. And I'm just getting it close to the red line. Well, over the red line, I should say. At 100%, that sounds like this. right? So it's got a lot of attack, but I didn't want that much for this main bass sound, so I brought that back down. And then I added Devil Lock. This is an audio level destroyer. I'm being very subtle with this because this literally squashes the signal to the high heavens. I'm literally mixing this in at just over 1 there. If I crank this, listen to this. That is super compressed. If I just have it just over 1, that gives me just a nice bit of kind of like parallel compression in a way. So it smooths out the bass signal even more, gives it a lot of punch and attack without me actually going overboard with the distortion and stuff like that. The other thing as well is, you probably noticed when I turned it up, you can hear a lot more of the bass when I do turn them up. So this is why we also kind of cut out these mid frequencies here, because when you crank these distortions and these saturations, especially Devil Lock Destroyer, it brings the volume of everything up, including all the mid bits. Again, if I crank it and listen to the gaps here, you hear that? The bass buzz, right? That's why you kind of want to clean them up so that you don't get too much of that noise in the mix. I kept them in there for whatever reason, but the main part that I do cut out is this bit. So it completely cuts it out and it's clean. So that's doing a bit. I then added some Neutron 3. Excuse me. And here I've got a bit more going on. So this here has a gate to start with. There's 3 plugins within Neutron 3. The gate here is getting rid of anything below a certain frequency, and that'll probably be cleaning up these bits here. Let's take a look. Yeah. So rather than cutting out all of these for the remainder of the song, I just use the gate. You can actually see that in verse 2 over here. I don't even do any cutting. I actually just rely on the gate here. I probably should have just done that in the first place. But the reason I wanted to get rid of these 2 here is because the gate wouldn't cut out these bits here, because this is actually an audible signal that I'm playing on the bass test. That's why I actually cut them out. So a gate just to clean it up a bit further post the saturation. We then do a little bit more equalizing here. And what I'm doing here is I'm boosting at 200 hertz. So you can see that you got the fundamental frequency all the way down here. This will be a harmonic frequency. That's what these peaks are in the bass. They're kind of the harmonics of the sound. So I just wanted to make sure that if you're hearing it through a phone speaker or something, that you could so quite easily. So I boosted it around there, and I do quite a lot, to be fair. I think it sounds nice. We then have some dynamic EQ reduction at around 740. As I was adding the saturations and stuff like that, I noticed that a lot of extra energy was coming in that mid-range, so I just wanted to tame it. And then we have a dynamic EQ going upwards in the higher range there. You see how they're moving just up and down, giving it some nice clarity. We then have a multi-band compressor here. So in the low register, I've cut this from below 100 hertz, and this is going to be the sub of the bass here. So if I solo this multi-band section, you hear that that is just the sub. And what I like to do when I'm playing with a bass like this is I like to process each of the bands differently, because I want different things from them. The sub, I want it to be smooth. So I have a relatively fast attack, but you can see it's still poking through a bit. But I wanted the release to be controlled. I want the sub to be controlled and smooth. That's what I'm aiming for with this. So we turn the knee up here. That is going to help with that. The mid section, I want a bit more. Sorry, excuse me. I want a little bit more clarity, a little bit more attack, especially for this indie pop tone. That will make me a genius. So you can see I've got a much faster attack and a slower release. This is just giving a bit more of that transient energy. And then for the high end here, I'm really trying to get some nice attack in the top end with a semi-fast attack and a fast release. So when you put all that together, it gives it a really nice rounded sound. And you can process these however you want. Obviously, depending on the bass style, you'll process them differently. For indie pop, I wanted the bass to be smooth because I want the deep, rich poppiness of that sub. And then I want the attack and clarity of the top end. So that transient energy was important to me. We then added some MOTT. This is Slate Digital's version of OTT, goated plugin. And I'm using the bass mid push section. What do you call it? Preset. That's the word I'm looking for. Preset. The bass mid push preset. And I'm going in at 27.6. Let's listen to how that sounds. And what that's doing, that's adding a final coat of compression to help just glue all the sounds together to kind of make it sound like one cohesive thing, which it is already. But obviously I've got the multi-band compression, and then this just adds that final layer of just, right? And then the final thing that I'm adding here is something called Oxford Inflator. This is a secret weapon, and I've got the clip on, I've got the effect 100, curve 100%. Let's listen to how this sounds. Nice. So it's hard to explain what this is actually doing because I don't think anyone actually really knows. But in my mind, what it does is it inflates a signal without increasing the volume. So it kind of makes the perceived volume louder. So if you look at your waveform here, you can see that we've got sort of a quieter section of the waveform here and louder here. What this would do is it would bring up the perceived volume of this entire section, and it would also maybe slightly lower the volume here without affecting its dynamic energy, if that makes sense. So you'd get a slightly more consistent sound without compressing it, if that makes sense. That's my understanding of this plugin. I don't know the science behind it, but I know it works really well. I would wait till it's on sale before you get it though. But it is a great plugin. And that is the main bass sound, okay? That is the fundamental of the entire thing for the song. We then have a second part here. And this is the second tone. And so what I've done here is I've just copied the same bass track down to a second track, okay? Same thing right here. And what I did here was I added a gate, again, just to get rid of all the bottom end, all the energy I don't need. And then I added just one of Logic's own plugins here, the Happy Face Fuzz. Let me turn this up. So this is a really heavily affected chain here and bass because I want to blend that into the main signal. We got the Happy Fuzz. We're going very extreme with that. With the channel EQ that I add on afterwards, I'm getting rid of the bottom end because I don't need any of that. I've got that from the original bass. So we cut that out. We then add a little bit of chorus. This just spreads it. Again, because I don't have any of the bottom end, I don't need to worry about any phase issues. So I'm just spreading it out, and that's how it sounds here. So you're wearing headphones, you'll hear it spread left and right. Okay, so really cool texture. And then I blended it in at 28 here, minus 28 if I just bring that up there. And then that just adds a little bit of source to the main bass line. You can hear there's a tiny little buzz in the background. If I remove it, back in. Okay, and that is the main bass tone. I did add a second or a third bass layer in the chorus here, but actually it's so quiet that it's inaudible. Basically, it's another version of the bass, but with a slightly different plugin, this time with the tube burner pedal from Logic as well. That sounds like this. I'll just turn this up. So a slightly different tone, but actually I had it at like minus 50. You can't hear it in anything, even if I had it soloed with these other two, because I just didn't really love the sound of it. But I kept it in there anyway. I think more out of laziness. Whoops. Cool. So that is how I got the tone. Okay, so you can see there's lots of layers to it. There's lots of steps. And you kind of have to do that if you're dealing with a straight DI bass tone. Now, moving on to the mixing portion, because I wanted to treat this all as one bass as opposed to three separate layers, I put it all through a bus here, and this is where I do more of my mixing, okay? And the main thing that I did was I listened to the entire thing and I go, right, what's it need? Right, I'm hearing everything now. I've done the sound design. I added myself an EQ, and I took away the real low rumble here, below 20 hertz, don't need that. boosted it at 130 hertz, and I've got a little bit of a dip here, a little bit of a cut at around 130, and then again a bit more clarity up at 3 kilohertz. Just a bit more shaping there. I then add an L2, and this L2 here is catching any of the transients that might be coming through. You can see there. Every single time I hit, it's just addressing those peaks. So it's going to give me a really nice smooth sound, but not take away the transient energy. The next plugin on the bus here is actually Track Spacer. Now this is going to work hand in hand with the kick drum. If I play the drums here and solo them, you'll hear that every time the kick hits, the bass ducks. So what that means is anytime the kick hits, the bass ducks and there is room for the kick drum. Okay, that's what I'm doing there. I then add a final bit of linear phase EQ, and I think what I do is I automate this one. Let me have a little look here. Yeah. So what I do is I actually take away some of the low end for the first part of the verse here, because I don't want it to be super bassy. And then I drop it when it comes back in the chorus here. So with the harder attack and then with more of that bass coming in, you can hear that the same bass sound on the same channel just sounds bigger and more mighty. I use a linear phase EQ because then it doesn't affect anything in the bottom end. I don't get any phasing or anything like that. The next thing that I add is, this is more of a creative effect at this point now, is the Storch filter. This is just a filter plugin. If I open up and see what that's doing, that is somewhere over here. Yeah, this is in the turnaround. This isn't doing anything in a mixing sense. Like I said, this is just a creative effect. When we go into the verse, the bass just dips out. You can hear now that's dropping down. And then we're back in. The final thing that I add is Soothe. And Soothe, if you don't already know, just gets rid of all the resonant frequencies. After adding all these bits and pieces, I felt like there was just some crazy rumble down here in the 80 hertz range. Just play that. There, so we're just taming that there and keeping it nice, smooth and easy. And that is how I got my indie bass pop sound. So take of that what you will, copy the settings if you like. The main thing for me is focus on your performance. Finesse, not caress. Oh my gosh. Caress your tone. Finesse your tone, and then mix it into the track and see how you get on. Hope you found this video useful. If you do, like, subscribe, follow for more, and I'll see you in the next one.